Oswald was arrested because he matched a description that came from out of nowhere. Unseen forces, invisible to us even today, infiltrated the Dallas police and planted this description. Who, calling themselves the family, told the outright lie that John did not have the necessary license to fly, and at the very same time began spreading the utterly baseless story that there was no flight instructor. And why did all the news accept this baseless story? Are you starting to detect a dark presence at work here? The lying of Colonel Rourke, the FAA saying that they didn't get any of the many phone calls the family made, the incredible 15-hour delay in sending search craft to the crash site, the mass of other missing pieces. This information is disturbing for what it suggests. It smells really bad, but the outline of what's really going on is far from clear. Let's see if we can sharpen the picture to get a better view of what's going on and who's involved. In their final report, a year after the accident, the NTSB featured the dramatic story that one of John's flight instructors had offered to fly with him, but that Kennedy told him that, quote, he wanted to do it alone. This story dominated the news about the final report, as well it might. Stories of Kennedys killing themselves are red meat for the press. They love it. Another Kennedy turns out to be a careless, irresponsible, stupid bastard who killed himself and his lovely wife. Too bad about her. But wait a minute. If this is such hot stuff, and it is, how come it didn't come out in the days right after the crash? The government did a better job than the media in digging up this story? That's a little strange, isn't it? I can answer that question. Yes, it is. So maybe we need to have a closer look at where this story comes from. ABC, the LA Times, and everybody else got their information from the NTSB final report. But this doesn't tell us very much. For example, who is this second CFI? What did he say, and when did he say it? Well, the Certified Flight Instructor, or CFI, is named Robert Morena, and according to this memo, written 6 months after the accident, he told the NTSB about this conversation he had with John Jr. on the morning of the day he died. This is real life drama, eh? You offer to fly with someone of JFK Jr.'s stature, and he turns down your offer of help, and then he crashes. Wow. That would be hard to live with, don't you think? Hard to keep to yourself. Man, you would want to right away pick up the phone and tell your mama. You would tell your best friend right away. It would weigh so hard on you that you would tell strangers standing next to you waiting for the bus. And he probably did, right? But you know the government, they take 6 months to do the paperwork after a trip to the bathroom. They probably took 6 months to get around to asking this guy, right? No, they talked to him on July 21st, 5 days after the accident. It seems to have been a long interview, plenty of time and opportunity for this flight instructor, Morena, to mention this conversation he had with John. But maybe the issue of John flying alone never came up. No, it seems that they talked about that and how John never did fly alone. Well, maybe for some inexplicable reason Morena somehow forgot to bring up the conversation he had with John that morning. For some reason he just didn't think of it. No, it seems that's not going to get it either. You see, this letter, written just 5 days after the crash, tells us that the only reason for Morena not to have mentioned during his NTSB interview that he had had this conversation with John is that he had already brought up this last conversation, the morning of the flight, in this letter, and had nothing new to add. Only he failed to mention one thing in this letter. Where's the part about John saying he wanted to do it alone? You got me. I don't see it. I can't explain it. So I called Morena. I said, you know, your lawyer says that he spoke with you, and that he asked you about your last conversation with John, and that you told him that you never had any conversation with John about his plans to fly that night, with or without a flight instructor. Morena didn't try to explain it. He said, whatever I told the NTSB, that's what happened. Then he excused himself and hung up the phone. Whatever I told the NTSB, that's what happened. But you see, Bob, that's part of the problem. I don't know what you told the NTSB. Not only because you told your lawyer that you didn't say anything to the NTSB about John wanting to do it alone, but I also don't know what you told the NTSB because the NTSB violated the most basic procedures in preparing this document. You see, in any official government interview by any official government agency, they're supposed to tell us when and where the interview was done. If no lawyer is present, they're supposed to acknowledge that the interviewee knows that he has a right to have one present, and when they're done with the interview, they're supposed to type up a summary like this one, and then they are supposed to have the interviewee sign it, as they had Christopher Benway do here, verifying that the contents of the interview summary are correct. But there is no such verification on this letter. Did Morena say it? He wouldn't answer the question. David Muzio, the NTSB investigator who prepared this nasty piece of work, refused to talk to me and referred me to his supervisor, who would not answer the phone, would not return messages, would not answer letters or emails. But now let's review. 1. 5 days after the assassination, after the plane crash, Morena writes a letter for the NTSB where he mentions having a last conversation with John the morning of the crash, but he doesn't mention John telling him he wanted to do it alone. 2. Later the same day, Morena is interviewed at length by the NTSB, but the summary of that interview doesn't contain any mention of any last conversation. 3. 6 months later, the NTSB writes a memo saying Morena has suddenly remembered the crucial details of this crucial conversation. The unverified memo says nothing about how, when, or where Morena was interviewed. And 4. A month after that, in response to an NTSB inquiry, Morena's lawyer says that this sudden recollection is false, never happened. In fact, although we cannot say for certain one way or the other, the weight of the evidence suggests that not only did John Kennedy not tell Morena that he wanted to do it alone, indeed, the weight of the evidence suggests that there was, in fact, a flight instructor on that plane. Nevertheless, Morena's utterly incredible story was put into the NTSB final report and was then carried as the lead story in all the major media. I'm not implying, I'm saying, you can put this stuff on your roses, but don't you dare swallow it. How could the NTSB have accepted this story? How could they have included it in their final report without mentioning the lawyer's letters and the other glaring inconsistencies? And how could they have claimed to be finished with their investigation without resolving any of these inconsistencies? I don't get it. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, I do. But we're supposed to be able to learn from our past experiences. We're supposed to know something by now about how the bad guys manipulate the news when they kill one of the good guys. And if we have learned anything, we should be ready then to bet the farm that there was a flight instructor on that plane. So, they're trying to make us think there was no flight instructor. That means there was one. Okay. Makes no particular sense, but okay. So, they must have delayed the rescue for 15 hours so they could recover this guy's body. Am I missing something? Is there some other possible explanation? Well, at least now we have an explanation for the delay. It's a lousy explanation, but it's all we've got. Apparently, they pulled this guy out still trapped in a seat, which is why one of the seats was missing. Okay, this is crazy, but it's the only remotely reasonable explanation for what we know happened. Why else present this dubious crap to us to make us think there was no flight instructor? Why else delay the rescue for 15 hours? That delaying of the rescue, what a mess. ABC got the beacon. The freaking Coast Guard spokesman, Todd Burgun, is running around telling everybody about how Kennedy contacted the tower, forcing Senator Kennedy to wake up Clinton just to get a plane in the air. All of this screaming evidence that something dark and evil is going on. Why would they do it? Okay, well now we have an answer. They did all of this provocative stuff because they didn't want the search and rescue craft to get to the crash site until they had time to recover the body of the flight instructor, get the logbook, and remove the battery from the cockpit voice recorder. But why? Maybe I should just let it lay, but I won't. I guess it's just the kind of animal I am. Maybe I'm a little bit like them that way. See, they could have just left it alone too, and they didn't. Suppose they let the news people keep the story that a flight instructor was on the plane, and suppose the body of a flight instructor got recovered. What does that prove to a suspicious guy like me? I can tell you what. Not a damn thing. But the millisecond I heard that the story had changed, that suddenly there was no flight instructor, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. No fooling. I knew right then I had to start looking as deep as I could go. And the way things are now, with the evidence we now have in hand, the one thing that is clear here is the presence of an unseen hand at work, trying to guide us to think that there was no flight instructor on the plane. And to me, that about proves that there was one. You may think that sounds crazy, but now answer me this then. Why did they steal the father's body and alter his wounds? Why? No good reason, but they did it. And because they did it, we now have 3 eyewitnesses to the deed, giving us our only real clue